Happy Monday. It's the end of March. We're on week 4 of our season with Finding Latinx. Here's our book, In Search of the Voices Redefining Latino Identity by, Paola Ramos. We're going to cover a couple of different things that we're going to have to lean into pretty uncomfortably, and the conversation will be great. Everyone will enjoy it, and people will comment, and it'll be fun. Before I invite our guests in, I just want to remind everybody that we are still in Women's History Month. We have a few days left. Do something good for a coworker, a relative, be aware, give gifts, watch movies, read books, do all the things that we're supposed to do for each other anyway, but definitely during a month where we're supposed to be highlighting how amazing women are. Okay, so I'm going to get Richard to come on. Hello.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Welcome to Monday.
Welcome to Mondays. Okay, and then this week we have our amazing friend, colleague, Keith Wolaridge. Thank you for joining us, Keith.
Hey.
Hey, good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello,
Hello.
Happy Monday to you.
Happy Monday to you both as well.
This week we're covering chapter 4 in Finding Latinx. I'm going to put the ticker in a second, but before I forget, because I forget to do these things until the very end, and then they probably get lost in the shuffle. I wanted to highlight this because I just launched it. It's under Epic, and it's for the nonprofit that I started, Feisty Fellowships, to support some of the projects that we're doing. So I'm going to run this banner at the bottom. I'll show. So I opened a store on bonfire.com. It's a This Is Epic store. There's only a couple of things on it, and we've only sold a couple of things, but I posted, I think, on LinkedIn that I keep having these ideas, and maybe a lot of you feel the same way, where you have ideas about that would be great on a shirt, but then you don't do anything about it. And instead of like going out and getting these shirts made just for me, I decided to just create the designs, and then Bonfire, creates the actual shirt and ships it out. So, and then whatever we make, I'm putting back into Epic and donating to Feisty Fellowships to do community projects and to help support the projects that we're working on with Epic. And so I wanted to show the store. Bonfire.com is the website. And then I'm going to share.
It's a great place to do all your birthday shopping.
Is that right?
These are original designs. I've created these myself. It's kind of fun. I have a bunch of things lined up. It's just kind of fun I never thought that this would be something that I would actually spend a lot of time on, but it's been kind of fun.
What do we have here? This is Epic, okay.
So that's the name of the store. And then here's one of the campaigns is called Avec Fromage, and this is a friend and I thought it would be funny to have a shirt that says Avec Fromage, and if you speak any French, you know that this means with cheese. So even if you don't speak French, now you know it means with cheese. This is really important to us. So.
It'd be my luck. I buy that shirt and somebody asks me, what does that mean? And I'm like, it was cute. Then I'm stuck.
It means with cheese. So because it's better with cheese.
Con queso.
Con queso, yes.
Con queso.
And then the original design, that was the second thing that I wanted to put up, but this is the original design that I created for this particular campaign. No more fucks to give, mugs and shirts. You're interested?
Yes, I gotta have a mug now. I gotta have a mug. I'll go online and as a school board member, I probably can't do a shirt like that, but I definitely can have I'll go get the mug.
Yeah. So
and leave it at home.
Conversations. Sometimes you have conversations where this comes up, and I wanted to make sure that it was connected to the work they're doing. So, sometimes I say you can't imagine giving one more. However, this is, you know, sort of like the mission is we do end up giving more, and we share our purpose and passion for giving all of the F's. And we know that there are people in the world willing to push just as hard and just as generously. So that this is the first campaign that I launched to support the Epic Jedi projects we're working on and the nonprofits. So,
and that was bonfire.com?
Bonfire.com, yes. And then This Is Epic is the store. Okay, so everybody buy your stuff.
All right, I'm gonna go get a mug.
Awesome. Okay, down to serious business now. Chapter 4 is called The Other Wall in Finding Latinx. And for our ticker at the bottom, I added human health and dignity because this chapter, they're pretty short chapters, but they seem like they cover a lot. We go from Trump administration policy and immigration to women's reproductive health and human rights to HIV outbreaks or increases in cases along the border. And so there was a lot to cover, but obviously these topics are important. So I wanted to add that human health and dignity part because, I mean, it seems like health should be a basic, you know, it's a basic human need to be healthy and getting checkups and not having to wear an ankle monitor when you're walking around a detention center, because where are you going to go anyway? But we'll get to that in a second. I'll ask you, is there anything you want to share before we jump into the actual text? Either of you?
Yeah, I think I'll save it for the actual text because I was okay. Shocked about a lot of things.
Me too, Richard.
Yeah.
So the first thing I pulled out, which was, I mean, not surprising to me because I've never been to this part of the United States, but these names of these towns are very familiar to me because my dad's family is from this area. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned this, and then I'm going to pull up a map in a second. But and I've been kind of hyping this book anyway, but I'm going to do it right now because it's related to this. A dear friend, Reina Grande, wrote this historical fiction, A Ballad of Love and Glory. It was released last week, published last week, I think, 2 weeks ago. I don't know. Time doesn't mean anything. A Ballad of Love and Glory, and it's about this area. So this is during the Mexican-American War in the 1840s and the fight with Texas and Mexico. And the St. Patrick's Battalion, the Irish immigrants who defected to Mexico to fight with the Mexican army against the Texans. It's a great, great story. Love. It's like this epic. There's obviously war involved, but it took place in this area, and the names of these towns are part of the story, which to me means it's part of my family's history. So I thought I'm going to keep bringing it up every opportunity I get. So I'm going to bring up a map now, just so we have sort of a sense of where Paola Ramos was when she was talking to the detainees. So I can bring up the right map. Is this it? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here. Can you guys see the map?
Yep.
Okay, so can you see? I guess I can't zoom in anymore. Here, right here, see how close these two towns are, Brownsville and Matamoros. They are like, you draw a line in the sand and one of them is on one side and the other's on the other side. Like that's how close they are. And they're right there. Okay, and so this is, there's a valley, around here, a lot of the battles took place all along here, McAllen, Laredo.
Wait a minute. Mexico, Texas is in Mexico. If you draw a parallel line across from Brownsville, you're in Mexico. You go horizontal line.
Yeah, I wish I could zoom in a little bit more, but it's definitely, I mean, for sure.
You
I mean, honestly,
line.
where should the line be? Like, do you want to go up the Rio Grande and then like keep going up? We can go all the way to Canada if you want.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that to that map. You go, what is it, 180 or 90 degrees west? Wow.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. So the river's there. The river is separating. Okay.
So they built some more wall along that border right there?
Recently?
Yes. Isn't that what it sounded like in the book?
Yeah, so
I wanted to go look it up, but I didn't. And
yeah, I didn't pull up any pictures or anything. I mean, things have changed. I think 2018 was when I think she was visiting some of these places. So yeah. Okay. So that's the location. That's where we are. Because well, in the map I pointed out McAllen, that's where a lot of people are being detained, is in McAllen, Texas. So we're going to be talking about immigration policies, zero tolerance, the apprehension and imprisonment of children. We can call it what it is. This is what was happening when she was there, I think with Vice, doing different stories, and then this related to it. Any comment on this? I mean, I feel like we've hashed this out even in other conversations, not about this book. We've talked about immigration policies and what's been happening at the border. That's still happening. People are still in detention centers. People are still trying to get in there, and now we have more of an issue. There recently actually was a story, and I purposely didn't go find it and set it up because I just want to tell you that there were a couple of things that I came across that talked about I'm going to say brown people being limited access to today, like yesterday, refugee status or asylum seeking, and white people being able to come in if they're making their way through Mexico to come in to receive asylum. They're being let in. So and the reason for turning them away was, immigration policy. So I don't know what that means. I just know that it's happening. People are documenting it. Reporters are there, reporting it. But let's go back a few years when this was taking place. And then I'm going to pull up a quote. It's going to make us all feel warm and fuzzy. During this time, we're not Nazi Germany, but we have standards we have to live up to, said CIA Director Michael Hayden about the policy. And we're only talking about this to kind of set the stage for what's going to come next. And because we're talking about human health and dignity, right? So this is the other part of the wall, right? So this is part of the physical wall, why immigration policy is in place, how we're keeping people out while seeming to invite people in. Any comment on this? Do you guys remember when this happened? I remember hearing this a few years ago.
I remember hearing the comment, but again, as most American citizens, you don't draw the parallel because we don't see it every day, right? But after reading the chapter in this text, the author had a way of kind of really painting a picture of what was going on there, and you can see that how some of these human beings were being treated. To your point about the lack of dignity, right? That a lot of them are having to endure in these immigration policies that they're dealing with. And I'm rereading that first sentence. We're not Nazi Germany, but I'm wrestling with that based on our previous book, Cass, when Nazi Germany learned their system from America.
Right. We like to point the finger.
Right. So I went, so when I see that now, I can see how these two texts, there's some overlap. They're about the dignity of treating people, of human dignity. I can see the overlap. So we're not Nazi Germany. No, physically we may not, but some of the policies wouldn't place on how we reject people's dignity and choose who receives it and who doesn't, we may have to question that.
Right, because then it's almost like we're qualifying it by saying we're not Nazi Germany, but there are also standards. Like that somehow, how do you say, how do you, I don't understand how you can say we're not Nazi Germany and then say anything else after that. Like, why isn't there a period at the end of Nazi Germany? Why is there a but? But.
And but, as you know from English, removes everything ahead of it. Now you deal with the sentence coming behind the but, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Richard,
what's the standard? What okay, we have standard. What is the standard? That's the question. All right.
White supremacy.
What's the standard here? That and we must live up to this standard. Okay, so and what's the basis of the standard? We can go on and on and on.
It's crazy to say that in the middle of kids in cages, right? Like, it's just so, I don't know. It boggles the mind. Sorry, Richard, I feel like we keep cutting you off. Are you going to say something?
No, it's yes, you kept cutting me off, but that's okay. No, I just, I think as I'm reading both with the current events happening in Ukraine and the refugees and we're immediately jumping on accepting refugees from Ukraine and actually taking steps, even for those that may not be coming to the United States, taking steps to help them get settled in other countries and being a full part of that. And then we have, the southern border where people are escaping from, the very similar things in which their lives are threatened and they have to get out of there. They're not walking across all these deserts to not just to get to the good old United States. They're escaping, many of them. And we treat them like hell, like, throw the ankle bracelets on them. In the other chapter, removing all their shoelaces and humiliating them and not giving them access to medical care. And, some of the things that happen there. And it's just absolutely disturbing, because if we saw that kind of treatment by, let's say, Poland to Ukrainians, we'd be up in arms right now. And but in our country, we just seem to think it's okay because we're setting a standard, right, of who we want to let into our country.
We have to live up to them. So this is like you're saying, the continuation of that, where she's walking in a detention center, noticing that the women are wearing ankle bracelets that allow ICE to track and monitor their every movement, which again is like, if they're in a detention center, where are they going to go? Where are they gonna go? Why do they have to have ankle monitors? This is like a basic question. Why? Like, we know what ankle monitors are for. We use them. We use them. We see, we know.
We use them for prisoners who are on probation.
Yes, right. But out in the public, out in their own spaces, right?
When I read this, I got angry. Not to cut you short, I got angry when I read that. Because I'm saying, all right, these are women with children.
Yep.
They're not going to leave their children. They're not going to desert their children. At least most women are not going to desert and leave their children. But I said, there's no need for an ankle bracelet. That's how we treat people who have done something wrong. And we want to track their movements and make sure there's no... they're not doing anything to violate their probation, So are these people already considered prisoners? I mean, my mind, that stunned me.
Yeah.
I got angry when I read that, actually. I was like, wait a minute.
Come on. Their babies.
Are we, again, to Richard's point, to any immigrant that's coming, we don't put that on when you come through Ellis Island. Do we?
Right.
What's happening?
Yeah.
that really disturbed me. Now, I don't know if I can speak on the rest, but that bothered me. That one really bothered me.
Well, if we're drawing back on a cast, we can talk about the dehumanization, right? I mean, that's step one, right? They're not humans. In this case, they're not Americans, so they're not human. So we have to treat them differently. I mean, that's
it's what we do. It's what we do as a country. We police the marginalized groups, and degradation. And that's what we do, and it's unfortunate.
Okay. Wait, were you going to say something else?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So we're talking about, I said we were going to talk about immigration and women's reproductive rights, but also HIV. So this sentence sort of encompasses the chapter, and she says all realities that have been overlooked and obscured for years. So this is like along this part of the border in Texas. Not to say that these things aren't happening, across the whole southern border, but in this situation, she's specifically talking about what's happening in Texas. So the idea that HIV also is like an issue, that because women are trying to immigrate into this country, that we're also going to control their reproductive rights. Like that's another issue. And then for the women who live in Texas, even if they're not, they may be immigrants, but they're already in the United States living in Texas. Also like how restricted their lives are. So yes, it's still part of like that southern border. They're away from the actual line, let's say, but still living in southern Texas. And so here's one of the things that she brings up. Many Latinas constrained to rural grounds, again, Texas, pinned against the wall, tied to the law, push against barriers that slowly attempt to chip away at their dignity. And, we talk about, what is a life worth? Who gets what access to which things? But this is also like rural. I mean, just in general in America, if you're in a rural area, you're already starting off, isolated in a lot of ways. And if you're on the southern border of the United States in southern Texas, it's language, it's healthcare, jobs, school, it's all of these things. So when you read through this part of it, specifically when she's moving away from the border into the rural South Texas, like what sense are you? Because I feel like maybe you were outraged. It's upsetting. Maybe you don't. I don't know if there's an issue with relating, because there was a lot of focus on women in all of these chapters, but in this space specifically,
I was a little uncomfortable, but I was also shocked that the HIV conversation hasn't progressed in the Latin culture.
Yes,
I know it's we're getting better in the African American culture, having the discussion and the conversation, but the way the author outlined and described it appears like there's still a long way to go in informing the Latin, especially the men, about what's going on with HIV. I felt like they were 20 years behind when I was reading that, and I didn't know is that cultural? Help me with that. Now that's where I was stuck, because I was trying to relate, but I was like, man, we've been having these conversations for the last 20 years. But you said urban area, border town Mexico, or maybe rural Mexico, Texas. So maybe that's where I needed to help in the enlightenment as to why. That's where I was stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll hit HIV a little bit harder, Keith. I'm not going to let you skip this part of the conversation. We're going to deal with the women. We're going to talk about abortion.
That was embarrassing.
Rights. I'm sorry, what?
Did you see my cats go across the screen? They got into a little dispute.
So,
yeah, they're not going to give you a break either. Okay, so I'm going to bring up this. Hang on, we have a comment here. Oh, Sally on Facebook is laughing at us. Okay. So this kind of just sets the stage for what we're going to talk about next. Why the lack of access to all of these things can be, a matter of life and death for a lot of people. So, in part of the conversation, she brings up Roe versus Wade. She brings up the Hyde Amendment. What was her name? Rosie Jimenez.
Yes.
Rosie Jimenez. So a young woman, she was 27, couldn't access abortion, got, illegally went and tried to have someone help her, ended up having a bacterial infection and then dying, which, I mean, that we're taught. I don't care what your stance on abortion is. We are having this conversation based around access to medical care, access to health care. And if this is something that a doctor and a patient, forget what your religious views are, that access to clean, successful healthcare for your body is important. It is it's a basic human need. So the idea that there's all this like conflating all these things, and then Texas doing everything they possibly can to make sure that as many women as possible die one way or another without anybody there to support them, is so frustrating and disgusting. And I had to say that. So she's traveling away from the border into rural Texas, and she's making this comment how we talked about the Central Valley in chapter 1. Miles and miles away from the Central Valley in California, the struggle at the border mirrors the one in the fields, a battle to prove one's life is worthy of living. So in California, in the Central Valley, the focus was on pesticides and not having access to clean air, clean water, the disease or illnesses that come from that, cancer, respiratory health issues. And now in Texas, just not having access, just being in a rural area and not having access. Usually because of undocumented status. But as we're inching towards this part of the conversation, I'm asking you two to kind of think about, what does this mean to you as a human being and as an American?
I think, especially when I was trying to understand all the cases they were talking about, and including the lack of abortion and medical care, and seeking out to establish this, that even when sorry, I can't see my notes without my glasses. Even when Rosie Jimenez died, and the discussion, but I also thought about, after she went to get her abortion on the street, and then obviously was sick for some time after that because of the infection, that she couldn't travel anywhere because there was no medical care. And then I started relating to the discussion, the other wall, and what that truly meant is that the life is living inside those restrictions, and the colonias.
Yes.
And being in neighborhoods that are purposely put out and separated from everybody else to try and make sure that they stay, in that thought process, that the residents stay there. You're going to stay there because we're not giving you access to transportation, to food, to these types of things, and so you rely on that little village to survive. And if you don't have what it needs to survive, you perish. And I think that was true both for Rosie Jimenez, and I forget his other name, that got HIV. But his comment, his comment, I couldn't travel. I couldn't travel to get tested. What are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
why didn't you go get tested? Because I couldn't go there. I just couldn't. And until he was diagnosed super into his infection, then he has to suffer the consequences of that.
Can you describe to me what a colonia is? So that I kind of is it like a tenement? What is it? So like I'm trying to draw a parallel here.
So to me, there's kind of a picture that I think the picture is the mobile home or the trailer park. For me, when I read her description of what the colonia is, like she calls them neighborhoods, I think about the farm worker communities that are out here in the valley, right? So these camps, right? Like camp for the farm workers. Like that's how I picture them, because they're out in the middle of nowhere and they're there because you're just supposed to work and go back to your house, and then somehow food and access to things is provided. And then I think about South Texas, and I've never been there, but it's desert, right? I mean,
right.
There's nothing else around. We've got hang on did you have a follow-up, Keith?
Yeah, because to Richard's point, if it's out if it's more rural and desert than, well, I think of Arvin, Lamont, McFarland, Delano, and the man who was ill. There's no medical facilities. Again, they are in this wall. Again, another wall, and the wall is the access, right? So to your point, human dignity, access to quality health care. No matter if you're for universal health care, that's not the issue. The issue is if the man is sick, okay, he's going to die without the right proper treatment. Why not? He's a human being. And again, we have these systems, goes back to caste, right? We have these systems, inherent systems that are in place that the marginalized, they die. Let's just be honest about it. They die.
Right.
They die. And it's very disturbing. That's why this chapter really, Letitia, you and I are going to wrestle over this chapter, because this really made me so uncomfortable that even though I have a very conservative stance on the issue, no one should die, especially over an infection.
Unavoidable, something that's avoidable.
That was an avoidable. We may not agree with the woman's choice. However, if we don't agree with the choice, she still doesn't deserve death based on an infection, if that makes any sense, what I'm saying.
So this comment from Raquel online, providing a safe space for women that will treat them with dignity. So one of the videos that I was going to pull up was from the ACLU, and they're doing this Voices campaign. It's on Instagram. You can find it pretty easily. And this woman is talking about, seeking out an abortion in Texas, not having access, having to leave the state and paying thousands of dollars to take care of this procedure that is supposed to be provided, covered as a medical procedure. But then, like, the indignity of being referred to, she said initially she was referred to a clinic that was, and I forgot the name of it, but one of those clinics that tries to talk you out of it by shaming you, to death. And so, like, how is that the first step in trying to make a medical decision, is like making you feel bad for having the condition in the first place? Like, how is that a safe space? How are you being treated with dignity as a patient? If the first thing that you walk into the ER and they make fun of you for whatever it is you're coming in for, it's just, I think that's why I keep pushing back on the, like, I don't care. I mean, obviously you're my friend and I care about you, Keith, but when it comes to, like, the dignity of, in this space that we're talking about, the dignity of a human being, it's not even about, like, who deserves what. It's just like a human being who needs medical attention.
You've helped me with that. You're right. It is it's a dignity question. Whether you agree with somebody or disagree with the person, we all deserve dignity. We're all human beings, right? And to your point, I don't know how shame dignifies the conversation, right? I don't know how guilt dignifies the conversation. People need to be restored one way or the other. So again, I when I see this other wall, again, I'll be honest with you, I'm completely ignorant of how our fellow human beings are living in the southern border of Texas. Again, I was really shocked that we still have these type of conditions in the glorious state of Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas, right? We're bigger and badder in Texas than everybody else in the union, but they have just as much poverty and blight and indignities as we do in the rest of the country. So that's why this chapter really, I learned something. I didn't know it, because all we think of Texas, we think of UT and Hook 'em Horns, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't even think this would be going on in Texas, but it is.
You know what else is bigger in Texas? The uninsured rate.
Yeah, that was amazing. That caught me off guard. I didn't know that.
In 2017, so I don't have updated stats, but the idea that just a couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, Texas had the highest uninsured rate of any state. How are you taking care of your people, Texas? Get your shit together. In the colonias of Texas, there are barely roads, no public transportation or schools. What you see is La Migra vigilantly roaming around the communities, monitoring the inhabitants' every move. If you don't know what La Migra is, it's
Border Patrol.
Border Patrol. La Migra is Border Patrol. So the one thing that people who live in these areas, in these rural areas, do see, they don't see buses. They don't see an ambulance. If they call, it takes 30 minutes for them to get there, 40 minutes for them to get there. They don't see schools for their kids, but they see Border Patrol trucks and agents constantly.
You're living in a state of fear constantly if that's the case.
Yeah.
That's the wall, right? That's like the metaphorical wall.
You're living in a state of insecurity constantly. Mm-hmm. If that's all you see, no public transportation or public, I'm assuming the same, no public transportation or public schools.
Right.
Then how are we educating the children, right? And if you're afraid to leave your trailer, I guess, that's a wall.
Yes. Absolutely.
And and a part of that too is when I was looking and thinking about education, I think Keith will appreciate this, but as you start talking just in our own community, if we talk about some of the rural towns where there's a lot of poverty, and we start to do things and you get the right people in the right place, they start to grow things, you start making a difference, and you're basically tearing down that wall and doing what you can to support those communities. But then one little shift, and then you see somebody comes along and starts building that damn wall up again, and then everybody's blocked from even progressing out of the community. And I watch it happen here in the Valley constantly, to where schools are they're supported. We're getting more teachers going out to our rural schools and doing these kinds of things. And then suddenly, well, there's no incentive to keep doing this, because, who cares what's happening in Arvin, or who cares what's happening in McFarland, and it starts to die out. And it's sort of almost like a business cycle, but you watch it, that trend. And so that wall just gets built right back up. And
I'm thinking about the wall in the Latin community is the equivalent to the ghetto in the urban community. We built all these tenements where we just house people. That's a wall, right? And again, just reading this, I had no clue. So thank you, Letty. Again, thank you. That our rural communities, and we live in a basically rural community. I did not know, even if we were to maybe take a survey now, I'm sure some of my students at BC, some are living in fear because of the wall. If they come to campus on the wrong day, you know what I mean? Or they go out on the wrong. That to me is amazing that people have this is kind of this thing in the back of their mind that we come to a land of the home of the brave and a land of the free, but they're neither free.
Who there's I'm sure there's an asterisk in there somewhere.
I didn't till I read this text. Thank you. it's just like, wow,
You're welcome.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so we talk about this a little bit already, but this is I pulled this is a direct quote, and I shared this earlier with someone. To have control over your body is synonymous not just with the ability to access abortions, but with the ability to preserve one's own life. So that argument about who gets to make decisions about any body, like physical body, but women's bodies, when women are not in the room to help make those decisions. So what we actually need as humans is not really being offered. Those decisions aren't being made in our best interest. So when we talk about, my body, my choice kind of thing, it's about having that control over my own life to decide what, because not everything in this chapter had to revolve around abortions, but it happened to in this situation because of the people that Paola Ramos was interviewing, who she ran into in these different communities. But the bigger purpose is just having access to medical care, health care, to avoid, right? Like, what's the preventative thing? If there's no schools around, where are people getting educated just in general, not just the kids? Because we know that schools provide additional adult learning. So if that doesn't exist, then sex ed doesn't exist. Healthcare access or knowledge about any of these things doesn't exist. So it's about that control over your own body. And as a woman, I think about this all the time. It's like constantly in my face. People are constantly talking about it on the news, in my life. I assume neither of you have that experience, but do you feel like when you come across stuff like this, maybe reading this chapter, do you pay a little more attention? I mean, I don't want to be like, oh, well, you have wives and daughters, like that shouldn't be the reason. But do you find that makes it more relatable?
Well, again, I'm focusing in on to preserve one's own life. Mm-hmm. That's one of the values of this country. Our independence, our ability to say, leave me alone, in so many words, right? I come and go as I please. I have rights. To preserve one's own life, I think that comes from heaven above. To be able to stand on your own. And this challenged me, to be honest with you. I mean, this really challenged me to say, you know what, Keith, I need to think about this a little more, because that's one of the values I said earlier of this country. We believe in our autonomy. And whether these women come from New York City or from Mexico City, if they're in this country, we should allow them that same dignity throughout the process. And I'm beginning to see we're not. Mm-hmm. We're not. And this, again, this really stretched me. Because, again, I come from, I'll be honest, from a predominantly African-American perspective on this issue, but I didn't think my Hispanic brothers and sisters had the same issue, especially it didn't dawn on me till I read this. So I got more study to do. Because we're all human beings and we all deserve dignity. And this really opened my eyes. This really opened my eyes.
Awesome. Richard?
Yeah, I when you made the comment of having sisters or wives and then trying to relate that way, I do that. I do that a lot. I try to pull in though that feeling purposefully, and because as I'm reading the text, and to say, if any member of my family had to go through that, how would I feel then? Why am I not more emotionally? Why am I not more outraged? Why am I? And so it does come about the outrage and believing that it's what Keith said, that, no dignity at all, slap a bracelet on or on them and do these kinds of things, you know, that we don't do to anybody inside the country. It's just because somebody is in poverty or their life is threatened and they're trying to escape something, and we just sort of look the other way. And so I tie it to those feelings, because somebody cares about these people. They've got family, they've got, you know, children, they've got people that are depending on them, and they deserve the rights and the dignity that we all have. And so, and then I get really emotional, so I apologize for that.
You know, I go back to Rich's initial statement. Again, we have human beings coming in from Ukraine and Poland over the next, we're going to see this over the next couple of years. What do you think would happen if we put ankle bracelets on those people? Can you imagine the outcry?
Yes, I can imagine.
Right? Wait a minute. Isn't that a human being's life? The dignity of human beings, whether they come from Ukraine or the southern part of Mexico, aren't they still human and deserve dignity? Where they matriculate from or immigrate from, it should not be an issue. Can you imagine as soon as they hit the airport in Dulles or wherever they come in and we just slap an ankle bracelet on them and say, all right, we would be up in arms. So why are we not up in arms for the same human being with the same value?
Okay, I'm going to pull up a comment from someone who's listening, and it doesn't deal directly with what you're talking about, but it kind of deals with caste a little bit and the system we have in place in the United States that we are have accepted as the way things are. I don't know who this person is, Stevie Hager. So this idea that healthcare is at a certain level of, I don't know, access. You want to get the insurance companies involved, I guess you can. The way that insurance is tied to employment, we can talk about that. We can talk about the astronomical prices that around the world, people are disgusted with the way that America charges for medical procedures. We can have that conversation. And Stevie, whoever you are, thank you for listening and commenting. But I also know that this is it is a bigger issue than what we're talking about right now. But why isn't healthcare based on the humanity of the people living in the country versus the profits for old white guys that established the system and their families who are still now reaping the rewards, right? Generationally.
The question I would have for the gentleman is, he says it's for those that have the money. What if your family didn't have the money? Would you feel the same way? Because if I can afford it, yeah, I get it. But not everybody can afford it. Mm-hmm. And isn't their life still worth something whether or not you have the income to afford it? Isn't the life of a human being valuable enough, whether an air? It's about value. That's where I see the point. I get it. I get where the gentleman is referring to, but we're human beings. Mm-hmm. So we're basically saying, if you can afford it, good for you. If not, shame on you.
Better luck next time.
But we're human.
Okay. All right, I want to move into the HIV conversation. So in the end, all of these women that she talked to, she was just saying that maybe just in general, they need to be reminded that they are in fact free, that metaphorical wall that stands in their way, that there are ways, you know, to kind of break that down in their own colonias as they're bringing people in to educate them about their own bodies and their healthcare and what might they have access to. It's also the bigger conversation about why do we have to rely on like nonprofits and religious organizations or whatever, to provide that extra support to these kinds of communities when we do have infrastructure in place. In a lot of ways, in a lot of states, I don't know, Texas maybe doesn't. I don't know. I mean, we can get, this is a whole thing, right? But this is the system that Caste built, and we're just trying to like survive it. So we're gonna keep having that conversation. Do you want to go back to that?
Yeah, just really quick. I did read this statement. I had to read it a couple times because I was trying to think to remind somebody that they are in fact free, and depending on where they're from, depends on any level of freedom that they might have experienced in their life. But I thought about, are they truly free, even if as they come across the border and are granted asylum, but with ankle monitors on? And where's the freedom in all this? I had trouble with that, and I had to keep going back and reading it again and again.
So do you want me to comment on that?
Yes, please.
Okay. So if you go to that page, right before that, she's talking about the women's groups that are getting together to talk about women's health issues and what they're learning. Like I said, what they're learning about their own bodies and what they might have access to. And so there's this part where, because the group is called Poderosas, right? Like the powerful ones.
Las Poderosas.
Poderosas. And so like they're saying that just getting this group of women together to have this conversation is part of what is she's saying. You just need to be reminded that you're able to even do this is how you're supporting each other in that, for like psychological freedom. Physically, you are free because you're not enslaved and you're not in a detention center, and you don't have access to everything. But as you have these conversations and grow this group, you're educating more people.
Is she talking about the freedom of the human spirit? Is kind of a metaphor she's trying to get to?
That's sort of what I was thinking about, because even like this one person, she's this one participant, her name was Kayla. She says that she sees those spaces as therapy sessions, so they're like providing a support group for each other. And then she says, I'm diabetic. For me, this is like injecting insulin. So that, like, understanding that mental health component is also so important. Like you were saying earlier, Keith, about constantly living in fear or constantly looking over your shoulder or not knowing that if you call an ambulance, it's going to take them 30 minutes to get there. All of that stress and how that harms the body. And then having a space like that for women to get together to talk about these things and learn about themselves and what might be possible is therapy. It's therapeutic, and also that mental health component is probably what's keeping them alive in a lot of cases. Okay. Does that answer your question?
That helps.
I'm the expert.
And the author didn't, and maybe in subsequent chapters may talk about the mental health, because that's trauma daily. And I'm sure there's other health side effects, probably drug abuse, alcoholism.
Oh yeah.
All is running rampant and amok because of just under this constant stress and strain emotionally. We deal with it here in the metro area. I can only imagine. Again, I'm learning now, right, what it's like in the colonias. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Where there are no support services, where there's probably lack of wireless, and where you can have telemedicine and have these type of conversations, everything that we're taking for granted now. So again, right. I'm wow. That's all I can say. Wow.
So that support comes, from their own neighborhoods. On top of all of this, we learned that, statistically there's a crisis, an HIV crisis in the Rio Grande Valley. And she pulls out some stats about the increase in numbers that, across the board, maybe, especially with men who have sex with men. She described in the statistics that those numbers have kind of plateaued. But for some reason, in this area of the United States, in this part of Texas, around the border, those numbers have gone up. And so there's a crisis. And so she's talking to people about, like, well, like you were saying earlier about getting tested, and is there education around it? It seems like people know, but they don't act on it. And also in Latino communities, I'll just pull up the quote. The entrenched culture of machismo, the lack of sex education, and the scarce resources often feels like the easiest way to make it is by putting your head down. So you don't ask questions, you don't call attention to yourself. We watched a video, and then the chapter that we read about trans women, how they're treated, and it's all because of the culture. And the putting your head down is not you're not necessarily worried about law enforcement. You're putting your head down because you don't want the community. You don't want the community to be the one that pulls you out or throws you away or whatever. So there is a problem, and it starts within our own community. The lack of conversation, mental health, sex education. If those things are not existent, or you don't have a place to go to talk about them, I mean, that education is so important. Of course, there's an HIV crisis. I know we've talked about this already a couple of times, but is there anything that you want to add to this part?
No, it's what Keith was saying. It was shocking that, she said 1 in 4 would test positive at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And to hear those numbers, it's like, wait a minute, what? We just went through this pandemic where we watched it and learned a lot about the disease, and we were empowered to take care of ourselves and get our immunizations and do those types of things. And then here we have HIV, very similar viruses, but people are being cornered to where they can't even seek treatment or testing. Some of the basics of healthcare.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to call it Texas again. We're going to call it Texas again. Well, because this is specific to Texas, because as she's making her way across the United States, she's very specific about where she is and saying, this is the problem in this community, in this part of the United States. So we can say these issues are everywhere across the US, blah, blah, blah. But this chapter is specifically about this part of the US along the border. And, we talk about the huge numbers of the top numbers of uninsured being in Texas. We know now, I mean, that was 2017. We know now that, they're putting new restrictions in place, like daily, about trans kids, women's reproductive health. And it's upsetting me. I need some water or tequila. You don't know. But then at the end of the chapter, the quote is, the health literacy level in the area and in the state in general is very low. So not only are we not insuring people, we are not educating people, and then we're not providing healthcare for people. Texas, what are you doing? I need answers. Any comment?
I don't have an answer. But again, this is, to your point, this is Texas, right? It's like this part of the state is we're just going to cut this away, and, good luck. That's almost, we're not going to inform you. We're not going to educate you. Good luck getting to the hospital. Good luck in doing PSAs down there about HIV crises, or, having education for the men. it's almost like they've cut them off from the rest of the state, because you wouldn't find this issue in Austin or San Antonio or Houston.
Right.
Or there would be a lot more resources, but those are still tax-paying citizens in that part of the state.
Yeah, and I think I often think as I'm reading this that the majority in the population are people that have been marginalized, and the discussion as it goes is I can't remember which lady it was in the book said the politicians, they don't even know us, they don't even know we exist, and they're and so as people start to understand, and more books come out like Paola's book, and how people start to understand that they have power. And I think that'll be the change in the shift in the way things are run in our elections, is when people finally realize the power they do have, and we quit trying to, take their vote away. And so I'm just hopeful, I guess.
Richard, that's why we take their vote away, because they come to the realization that that vote does have power. No one takes anything away from you that doesn't have value, right?
Yep.
The minute you realize something has value, no one takes away anything that doesn't have value. So the vote is the most valuable thing that the marginalized have, but they don't know it, if that makes any sense what I'm saying. So if I can strip you of that, well, I got you. So that's a very, very interesting correlation there that we're making between the vote and these other issues, because I would suggest to you there's a correlation. The more you know, the more you earn, the more you're involved. People are taking interest, and we're electing people that have the same mindset. Maybe some things will change down there. But if you don't know, and again, I eliminate you from the polls, I make it harder for you to get to the polls, I can keep the status quo.
Right.
Don't get me going on voting rights and the implications of restricting people that should vote and can vote. That now you've hit my heart there.
Yeah.
It's all connected. Remember, it's all cast. We are preserving a way of life that was not built for us. Okay. Quick reminder, that's wrapping up the chapter. That last bit about, not knowing that there's a problem and not doing anything about it, was sort of how she wrapped up the chapter. Do you have any last comments you'd like to make about this particular topic?
That was a hard one for me. That was hard. And it was also eye-opening. We pick and choose what we want to see and recognize.
Right.
And that one was tough. And again, thank you for enlightening me.
Well, thanks for joining us. I knew this was not
that I can, again, all right, I need to understand, you know what I mean? And now when I'm in the rural areas of Delano, Arvin, Lamont, where we live, maybe even Edison, Weed Patch, maybe I have a different lens that I'm looking through when I'm having conversations, or some of my students.
Yeah.
If they're resident at something like, okay, all right, may not be southern part of Texas, but it could be in eastern Kern County, right? So thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks for joining us. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Okay. Next week, Chapter 5, April 4th, Chapter 5, the title is Unbroken, and our guest will be Mike Walsh. He will be joining us on Monday. Again, a reminder, Ballad of Love and Glory. I'll show you this book. And then last week I talked about Julissa Arce's book that came out. I actually did get it in the mail that day. I just hadn't opened it yet. So You Sound Like a White Girl is the name of this book. It's The Case for Rejecting Assimilation. So this is going to be an interesting read. We talked a lot about.
Is that next? Is that next semester?
Both of these? This one, you sound like a white girl. Maybe she'll even join us for a conversation. Who knows? So that's You Sound Like a White Girl, Julissa Arce. That just dropped last Monday. I don't know. It just came out. Okay. And then a quick reminder, if you missed the beginning, bonfire.com, go to the This Is Epic store, support our projects and support a local nonprofit by purchasing some really cool stuff that I'm designing. Yay. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you for everyone who's been commenting and chatting with us. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Richard. And we will see everyone next week.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.